Hello and welcome to another episode of Full Court Finance here at Zacks. I'm your host, Ben Rains. In this week, we have another episode about the intersection of sports, business, and the stock market. And this week, we're talking about the NFL and its TV partners, as well as their advertising partners on both sides. Because we're about halfway through the NFL season. By the time you're listening to this, it's basically through week 9. So it's a good time to look at the ratings and how advertisers are worried about what's going on. Because as most of you know, there are some controversies, to say the least, surrounding the NFL, which is up to this point by far the most popular sport in America. So we're going to look into if that's going to change anytime soon and how the TV partners and advertisers are looking at the league today. And I didn't think it would get to this point this fast because last year I knew the ratings were down a bit. This year I kind of figured it maybe be down just because TV is trending that direction. But at this point, it almost seems like it's full code red mode for the NFL and their advertising partners and their TV partners because people are freaking out. And it's mostly to do with one subject. But I mean, recently Papa John's is blaming the NFL for poor sales. Anheuser-Busch has a hotline that people can call to complain about NFL players kneeling for the national anthem. DirecTV is offering some refunds if you say you don't want to be a part of the NFL because of the national anthem controversy specifically. But before we dive into more of the details about this year, it's helpful to know a little bit about what happened last year. So last year, prior to the election on November 8th, ratings were down 14%, which is pretty big. But then after the election, weeks 10 through 17, they did pick up substantially and only fell about 1% for those last 7 weeks. So overall, there was an 8% drop, which is a big deal. And it can't all be blamed on the presidential election. So that's what happened last year. But still, the NFL is a really popular thing on TV. It had 5 of the 10 most watched single programs. The only other things that were on the list were Game 7 of the World Series, Game 7 of the NBA Finals, the Oscars, and an Olympic event or two. And they also had 4 of the top 5 most watched regularly scheduled programs. When you look at the rest of TV, the NFL wasn't even really that bad last year. So for all the talk about how the controversy is hurting the NFL, and that's why no one's watching, or whatever you think the reason is that people are turning off their TVs, it's really not an NFL problem, and they look much better by comparison because last year only one show on television grew in ratings on linear TV, and that was The Bachelor. So to put that in perspective, the NFL is not doing that bad. But what has everybody up in arms today? Like, why has it gotten to this point where we're halfway through the 2017 NFL season and Papa John's is freaking out and the NFL has an owners meeting where they're really worried about what's going on? And as most of you know, the NFL has been able to sort of dodge head injury controversy, why people still watch, domestic violence, multiple off the field arrests in the offseason. During the season, there's also controversy on the NFL side where last year the NFL owners get caught trying to basically steal $120 million of revenue sharing from the players. They get caught by the Players Association, and then they come out and say, oh, it was an accounting error. But still, no one really seems to care. People are watching the NFL. But then last year, everyone knows what happened. Colin Kaepernick started kneeling during the national anthem. More players did. And this year, I think it wasn't that big of a deal. And then President Donald Trump comes out, and then it just escalates from there. And since then, the advertisers and the TV networks and the NFL owners have started to really get into, oh no mode. What are we going to do now? Therefore, the question becomes, in the short term, what's at stake? The simple answer is the viability and image of the league, but really it's the billions of dollars that the league and everyone involved is making. And for a little context, 2016 NFL revenues were estimated to be roughly $15 billion. $7 billion was TV rights deals alone, and for some historical perspective, the NFL in 1997 only made $1 billion from TV deals. And in 2005, they were still making less than $3 million. So the NFL is growing in revenue sense. And Roger Goodell even wants the NFL to make $25 billion by 2027. So basically, they have to keep generating $1 billion more a year for the next decade to get to that point. And now the owners and Commissioner Goodell and their TV partners and their advertisers are worried this money's going to slowly trend the other way and not go up because people are not watching. And the ratings so far this year paint a relatively simple picture. They are down through week 7. That's the most recent numbers I had before we recorded this episode. So through week 7 of the NFL season, the ratings were down 5% overall. But the 4 major television networks, so ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, their primetime numbers for all their programming was down 8%. So the NFL is doing better compared to the rest of TV. And ESPN, compared for Monday Night Football, compared to their terrible, terrible ratings last year, is actually up slightly. So the ratings are down, but comparatively, they're not doing that bad. Still, though, the small ratings declines adds up, especially when you consider how much these NFL TV partners are paying for their NFL contracts. And when you look at, say, ESPN's paying over $15 billion for an 8-year deal for only Monday Night Football that ends in 2021, and CBS, Fox, and NBC have a 9-year deal for about $28 billion that ends in 2022. These small declines in viewership over the last couple of years really hurts because they're making money from advertising, and if viewers go down, then advertisers leave. So everyone is starting to get a little worried that this downward trend needs to be fixed, or their contracts that they signed a couple of years ago might start to look bad in the next couple of years because they can't get out of it, and they have another 5 years on a lot of these deals. And some people are looking towards streaming as the answer, that everyone's cutting the cord, and that's why some of the ratings are down, that people are going to look to streaming services to watch these games. But if you look at the Twitter Thursday Night Football ratings from last year, they were pretty abysmal. Amazon's ratings this year are not that great. ESPN gets like 3% of their viewers from the Watch ESPN for Monday Night Football, and that's on the high side for a lot of these networks. So streaming isn't the answer yet. It's just that people aren't tuning in for whatever reason, and a lot of the TV networks and the advertising partners think it's because of this controversy surrounding the NFL and players kneeling for the national anthem and President Trump sort of getting his base riled up about this as well. And it's a whole big storm of controversy surrounding a relatively simple thing that had, before the season, people, to me, it didn't seem like going into this year it mattered as much. People were worried that Colin Kaepernick didn't have a job, but I didn't think it had that much effect on the season, but clearly it has. And now the question is, how are the broadcast partners doing in the last year? So since the start of 2017, Comcast, which owns NBC, their stock's actually up 4.5%, which isn't great compared to, say, the S&P 500, but their NBC revenue is up when you exclude the Olympics from last year. They are still losing subscribers, but they're a little bit different case than some of these others because they also are a big conglomerate that has a lot of internet services, so people who are streaming still need to get the internet to stream these services. 21st Century Fox, which obviously owns Fox, their stock's down 7% this year, so Fox has been a little hurt by this whole NFL controversy. CBS is down almost 12%, and they're obviously, they own Showtime and other things, but they're down, and that's even with their streaming platform revenues and subscribers going up. And AT&T, which owns DirecTV, who has NFL Sunday Ticket, they're down 21% in the year. So that's not obviously all related to DirecTV and the Sunday Ticket package, but it doesn't help. And Disney, who owns ESPN, as most people know, Disney has been caught up in a lot of this because ESPN has had to go through all these job cuts. due to cord cutting and low viewership, and their stock's down over 6%, and they are now going to make a 2018 push towards standalone over-the-top streaming, as we talked about last week. And the question is, how has it gotten to this point where you have the CEO of Papa John's blatantly blaming the NFL on their earnings call for a lack of pizza sales? From all the research I can do, it basically comes down to the controversy surrounding the national anthem. ESPN's Seth Wickersham had a big, long piece about some recent owner-players meetings where there was just a lot of back and forth on what they can do to curb this issue, because clearly it's gotten to the point where now the players know that if advertisers leave, if TV partners slowly in the next 5 years renegotiate contracts at a lower rate, that's going to eventually hurt their salaries. So both sides need to work out an issue, and it's relatively regional. Some people don't care about this controversy surrounding the anthem. Some people do. For instance, in Dallas, where the Cowboys owner Jerry Jones is one of the guys really pushing for changes with the national anthem protests, and he sees it on his bottom line. For instance, the Cowboys-Packers game recently was down 19% from the year before. I mean, that's pretty staggering, and he's getting people calling in Dallas, businesses who sponsor the Cowboys, saying, like, we cannot have this hurting our business. And then one of the questions becomes, does the NFL want to be a bottom-line business where we're just going to do whatever it takes to make the most amount of money? So that's going to mean we either mandate players standing or whatever it becomes, or do we want to be a more socially aware league? And I would assume that they're eventually going to caution to being a bottom line business, because they are a business. They are a big TV giant that needs people watching, and they don't need controversy deterring people in any way. And for a couple little anecdotes to close out this episode, Bud Light is the official beer of the NFL, and their parent company, Anheuser-Busch, InBev, you can call an Anheuser-Busch hotline, which I did because I almost couldn't believe this is true. You can call a hotline and voice your complaints specifically about this players standing or kneeling for the national anthem, which to me just it shows you how impactful this really is, that this big, huge, multi-billion-dollar company has set up a hotline just so people can call and leave their complaints about why Bud Light is sponsoring the NFL when their players won't all stand for the national anthem. Dannon, who owns Oikos, which is the official yogurt company of the NFL, they're hoping to work out something, and they say that dialogue will be good going forward, and they realize this is also an issue. And no one's pulled out yet for sponsorships, but they realize this is going to be a problem, and if it doesn't get addressed in some real viable manner, it's probably only going to get worse. And then the biggest one, and the one I think is really interesting, is that Papa John's, on their most recent earnings call, the CEO, and I'm going to read from this, on the phone call, he said, "The NFL has hurt us. We are disappointed the NFL and its leadership did not resolve this issue." So that meaning the players kneeling for the national anthem. Leadership starts at the top, and this is an example of poor leadership. He basically then goes on to say this issue should have been nipped in the bud a year and a half ago, and they're now directly saying that the NFL's poor ratings in this controversy is causing their sales to go down drastically. They now expect this to continue. They're lowering their sales forecasts for next quarter, and they've started to pull some ads. They've started to pull national ads as well as regional ads, because they also are the official pizza, but they sponsor 23 individual teams, I believe, as well. And the NFL says they're going to start reimbursing them for ad space down the line, but for now, they're saying we're slowly going to get out of advertising national games, which if you're the NFL and you're their TV partners, that's got to really scare you, that a company who has said before in the past that their success is due in large part to their connection to the NFL, and the owner of Papa John's has come out and said, we know that over the last 3 or 4 years, Papa John's being a part of the NFL has helped us exponentially. And now they're saying being a part of the NFL is hurting us. So with that said, the question becomes, is Papa John's going to be just the first among many advertisers to start slowly pulling back from the NFL? Or are these smaller businesses, say in Dallas or places where this controversy has hurt businesses more, are they going to start pulling out? Is Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch, are they going to maybe slowly pull back from the NFL? And that's a question no one really knows at this point, but it is a big question that everyone involved in the NFL really needs answers to. And that does it for this episode of Full Court Finance. Until next time, I'm your host, Ben Rains. And remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email over at podcasts@zacks.com.